Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now, we all know that newspapers are not the most trustworthy sources for true information. You know, the most prominent newspapers like The Sun, The Times, The Daily Mail, they're the biggest right-wing papers in the UK. The Independent is widely regarded as the biggest centre-based newspaper, and papers like The Guardian and The Daily Mail are regarded as left-wing newspapers. In 2019 and 2020, The Sun and The Daily Mail were the most popular papers in the UK, which shows a particular insight into what people read nowadays, even though newspapers aren't as nearly as popular as what they used to be. Right-wing newspapers will often use egregious headlines to try and catch people's eyes out, so that they'll buy that paper, and often than not, they'll just be bashing innocent people for no reason, or just straight up racism and attacking minorities, which, I mean, it sells, but it is, morality just goes out the window. Straight out of that window. Due to the top two newspapers being right-wing, I'm going to be talking about racist headlines and how some of them are completely wild and they follow no sort of train of thought whatsoever, if that made sense. And then we all know Meghan's interview with Oprah and the immense backlash that she got from it, especially from Piers Morgan, and how because Meghan rejected him years ago, he feels the need to come after her in every way possible for years and years. The Sun felt the need to say that the Queen was sad, and the implication was that everyone wanted to think that the Queen was sad because of, Meghan speaking the truth. But it was actually in fact that the Queen was sad about Meghan and Harry's, how they got treated in the royal family. And even that is kind of debated because the Queen isn't an angel herself and she has many sketchy things about her, essentially. The royal family is rubbish, it's bad, yeah. I said that. The way Meghan gets treated in headlines compared to Kate is just absolutely absurd. If Kate and Meghan do the same thing, the media will attack Meghan whilst putting Kate on some sort of pedestal like she's an angel. So for example, when both of them had bouquets for their respective weddings, Kate's followed the royal code whilst Meghan's put Charlotte's life at risk. Kate's avocado was seen as a sweet little gift for a pregnancy, whilst Meghan's was linked to murder and human rights abuse. I made a TikTok video a while back, and some people did argue with me saying that it's not racism, but when the lines are clearly defined, with the only difference really between them is their skin colour, it's quite obvious to see that the newspapers have been blatantly racist. Tabloids have always had a history of racism. It's not surprising they did that with Meghan for absolutely years and years. Back in 2018, Sterling made the front headlines on many newspapers due to him having a gun tattoo. Many tabloids, including obviously The Sun and Daily Mail, wrote about this and put Sterling under a pressuring situation, not allowing him to reply and basically just using other people to lambast him further. They definitely didn't know if there was any meaning to this tattoo, yet just decided to blast him for it. And they used the unfortunate death of two teens that were stabbed in Sheffield and Northampton to further drive their nonsensical point home. Obviously, that had nothing to do with a gun tattoo. For a few years before this, they've been criticising him for shopping at Primark and earning a lot of money, which normal footballers do. They get paid insane wages for playing football every week. Come on. Sterling then came out with a post saying that he got the tattoo because his father was gunned down when he was 2 years old and promised himself to never touch a gun but use his right foot as a gun on the pitch, implying him obviously, scoring goals with it. Two well-known footballers who are white have decisive tattoos as well, yet have not been mentioned by tabloids really at all. Jordan Pickford has a large tattoo of a large blade on his left forearm. As we know, knife crime is a massive problem in the UK and is more prominent than gun crime. In 2018, police recorded over 40,000 offences with knives, whilst gun offences was at 6.9k. So why was Pickford tattoo not in the same light like Sterling's? Racism. Let us be honest here. I don't want to hear any debates because, the implication of having a large knife on your forearm compared to a gun on your leg, which is used because it's a personal story to you, is two very different things, let's say. Morena has a tattoo of a Beats by Dre loving, short-sighted, pensive monkey assassin. That is what The Sun tweeted. Absolutely wild. They didn't decide to lambast Moreno for that, but, decide to make a joke of it and say, oh, this is quirky, this is cool, With a white man, they saw it as no more than a fun, funky tattoo that, he can put on his skin and be like, hey, nice, With a black man, it seems offensive because apparently he's a role model for kids everywhere. But, you know, he's never said himself that he's a role model, and all he does is just, you know, play football and live his life. He's never said that he's going to be a role model for kids, you know? Muslims have sympathy for jihadis. Yeah, that is a crazy, weird, wild, racist headline. So, of course, we are talking about The Sun again. And this time, they made a headline saying, 1 in 5 Brit Muslims sympathy for jihadis. The Times also made a headline which said, 1 in 5 British Muslims have sympathy for ISIS. What makes this worse is that this is based on a poll carried out after the Paris terror attacks. Using a devastating attack to fuel hatred towards Muslims is utterly wrong and disrespectful. This happened back in 2015 and they were hit with a lot of criticism and Ipso complaints, thankfully. Ipso ended up saying the headline and the article was significantly misleading. People went to Twitter to sound off and used the hashtag to make some much needed humour about the outrageous headline. For example, hashtag 1 in 5 Muslims are lucky enough to not have a red squiggly line under their name in Microsoft Word. Hashtag 1 in 5 Muslims force their pets to wear modest Islamic clothing. That picture is so cute as well. I love it. And some of them discussed the discrimination that Muslims face every single day. Hashtag 1 in 5 Muslims are victim of baseless Islamophobic rants of narcissistic racists who show inherent bigotry. But honestly, it's a lot more than 1 in 5, to be honest, because, you know, a lot of Muslims face a lot of abuse, like daily. There's this Vice like documentary video, and it shows like the EDL and like how they go on marches, and some of the things that they say is absolutely outrageous and follows no train of thought. And like, once you argue with them with logic, their whole point and their worldview just breaks down, and then they become violent, which is very scary to a lot of people. To find British Muslims to poll, Survation called people with Muslim names. This was probably an attempt to speed up the survey so it could be published quickly, but Clement says problems are likely with this method. What this means is that only Muslims with typically Muslim surnames could potentially be interviewed, he says. It's impossible to assess what percentage of the UK Muslim population has typically Muslim surnames and how many do not. Respondents were asked whether they agreed with the statement, "I have a lot of sympathy with young Muslims who leave the UK to join fighters in Syria." The wording of the question is vague. Not all young Muslims who travel to Syria fight with the Islamic State or another jihadist group, and it is unclear what sympathy means in this context. The Sun and Survation used bad techniques to get results, and it meant that The Sun and The Times had a flimsy basis to use as a disgusting headline, basically. So, that was a summary of some racist headlines that were allowed to come out, all by The Sun, it seems, with a bit of help from The Times as well, obviously. Right wing, you know? Make sure that when you want trustworthy headlines, you do your own research and search up newspapers that have little bias in their reporting, and always try to look for websites which are only allowed to report factually or are allowed to have no bias in them, basically. Anyways, like, subscribe, comment if you've seen any other outrageous headlines that I could do a part 2 of or whatever. And thanks for watching. Peace.